Welcome back to the Battle of Malvern Hill. Made a few changes from my camp video. I dumped in more rookies to expand uh, my infantry units generally as much as possible. The expansions were mostly done on the rookie or almost completely brand new units. I also swapped my 20 pounders onto the 3-star unit, and I created one more Napoleon gun. Uh, so I had to buy a few muskets and the Napoleons. I also expanded the size of, I think, the 24 pounder units a little bit since I had some extra space. The reason I had to do all this is I'm facing a pretty high training amount and a pretty high weapons amount in terms of the intelligence report, which means that I'm mostly facing rifled artillery and I'm facing nothing but 3-star units. So my original plan was to try and do a forward defense in the 2 clumps of trees in front of the victory point, and eventually falling back on the right a little bit, and then trying to hold there. What I found is eventually I would get ground down and then pushed out, and once you get pushed past the final, like the 2 houses, you're completely in the open and it just turns into a mess. So what I decided to do is sort of a delayed retreat. You can see I have my general sitting on top of the victory point to give me vision and to sort of influence the AI a bit. I have one infantry unit to sort of block my artillery when it's eventually going to retreat. And I have my artillery set up to attack the enemy artillery to inflict as many casualties as I can. The goal is I want them to send a single unit down to trigger the flag, like just happened. This actually was a little surprising. It triggered way earlier than it usually does. Like usually that cob would have to basically be on the victory point to trigger it, but it triggered early this time, which is actually going to cause some issues. If it triggers a little later and more of the forces come down south before it triggers, that actually works a little better. Also gives you more time to work on the artillery. So I'm falling everything back to the edge of the map. I'm going to let them take the victory point and fall back to an even further line. The advantage of doing this is you are going to be much closer to your reinforcements, and those reinforcements are going to arrive much earlier. If you let those first 2 timers play out entirely, the battle is something like 7 hours longer, which is a long time to hold with one corps, especially when they have so much artillery stacked up. I can beat the artillery if, or I guess I can beat their infantry if I have canister support. But with so much rifled artillery on the field, I can't keep my smoothbore units close enough to provide canister support without getting destroyed by the rifled artillery. So because the phase change shifted early, I had to fall back with the snipers. Sometimes they can sit up there and fire at stuff for a while. Um, and usually the AI crosses with a couple of units, which is why I have some infantry in the woods here. So we got another quick phase change, which that's about normal, which is good because we don't want to get trapped against the board edge. But now we're sort of in this weird spot where there's a lot of infantry further to the left, and they're actually standing on the vision point, which means they can see my units on the left. Optimally, they aren't standing on that vision point, or at least don't for very long. So those units are all hidden, and then you can then basically the AI will send a few units over, but since it can't see anything, it won't send any support, and it'll send everything south. The upside of this is that there's less units battering down my defenses in the south, and that can actually become a problem. On one of my attempts, I didn't have quite enough artillery support on the right side, and eventually that flank folded. And once you get pushed off that hill, you probably aren't getting it back. So perhaps the distraction of more units going to the west is actually a good thing, but it's very annoying in terms of what my original plan was, which was sort of to leave this infantry here, kill whatever tries to come across, to block any AI units from going over there, so I can keep my flank safe and send other units up along that way. and also to eventually form a barrier so that I can crush their entire army so it can't flee across the river. Because by giving up the point so early, you do cut off a lot of time in the battle. So now we only have 4 hours to try and destroy their entire army and get the point back. Getting the point back is pretty easy. The AI eventually sends everything to the south, and it's fairly easy to just go grab it at the end. But killing everything is considerably harder. So that's sort of the start of everything going wrong in the west. That unit really wanted to have been shot at, taking full volleys while it was in the water, but it ran out of vision briefly when it hit there for some reason. I think I needed to have the infantry a little closer. I wasn't expecting to have them positioned this early. I was expecting more units to go to the north first and then come further south, and that just didn't happen this time around. So I'm going to get my defense of the bridgehead is basically immediately broken, uh, and it's just that entire side is never really going to completely recover. But I am sending some cavalry around that way to get up behind the AI and go after some of its artillery. That's the other benefit of this fallback is the AIs are a lot of the AI's units and artillery sort of is expecting you to be on this point and fighting you there, and so it spends a lot of time sort of milling around, which lets us destroy units piecemeal as they come in. You can see I'm setting up pretty heavy lines with multiple smoothbore units in support. All my rifled artillery is in the center to focus counter battery. And then I have my grenadier units, which are musket armed and with the charge perk set up to help countercharge. And I'm setting these snipers and such up on the edge because the AI will eventually start trying to force units across that point. It seems to be coded to try and get units across the river so it can flank you, but if you block it in the north, it will try and do it in the south and will just walk past your units while trying to get there, which is really silly, but I can see how that ended up being an edge case that, you know, pathing algorithms are what they are, so the AI ends up doing something not particularly smart. But so on the upside, we managed to take out one of the units that charged us. The other one, we lost that fight because we didn't have any support, so we're getting pushed out of there. But we got our first set of reinforcements. This is several hours earlier than we would have otherwise. So we're going to use those to, well, there's not a lot of infantry in that corps, but we are able to bring up some additional artillery support to have canister opportunities along our entire line, which we're going to need to try and keep ourselves safe. I brought the snipers down. I would have preferred to send them up and start going after artillery, but I'm still hoping to be able to knock that infantry unit out of the woods so I can regain a good position around the beachhead, but it just don't have the firepower when that unit is sitting in cover to be able to get rid of it. But for now, we're able to get some of the skirmishers on the flank and get some shots in. And they're sort of trickling units in, and we're able to start doing some damage there. You can see that I basically don't have anything in my center initially. I'm going to sort of have one unit sitting there with some support from skirmishers and my more experienced rifle units. I've got my best accuracy infantry on the far left to hit the units that are going to be moving around over there. And I've got the cold RR unit sitting where I can constantly hit units on the flank while not getting shot at. So bringing the rest of the cavalry around, gonna try and get rid of the artillery. Most of it sits around up there, and usually you can snag a couple of wagons. It looks like I only see one at the moment, so generally hopefully we can get more of them. There's like 5 or 6 wagons in this battle. Usually you can get all of them, but sometimes they move places and you just can't get to them, especially with this fallback strategy. So we're going to end up in melee quite a few times. I do fall back briefly often to see if I can cancel it, because my army's still just better at shooting. But that's part of the reason why I ended up going with much larger unit sizes. Is there's just no way to stop the charges when it's these 3-star units, not reliably. So I boosted the units up so they would be better in melee and would be able to survive successive charges without getting too small. And hopefully this will also mean that I won't need to, I'll be able to keep the units up to size a little bit better without having to dump tons of veterans in. Though I'll probably still just dump the 5,000 in. And then once I've chased them a little bit, I mash spacebar a whole lot to try and get the unit to halt. Fallback doesn't seem to work very reliably at the moment. And when I really need to get the unit to move, I'll just click backwards. You probably are going to take some rear flank doing that, but it's seems to be the most reliable way to drag units out of combat at the moment. So it's a little dangerous in the middle here, but I do have flanking fire on all these brigades, so once I get everything set up, I should be all right. The smoothbores are a little close, in that so I have to be careful that I keep track of any artillery that's getting too close to me, because they will start destroying that smoothbore artillery. Should have paid more attention to those snipers retreating on the left. They're going to take a volley right now and lose our first officer. Little unfortunate. We took 10 casualties, and one of them was the officer. You can see that this middle section is kind of iffy because you have the 2 fields there, and then you have to fall all the way back to the woods, and that's a little far back to support the edges. So I'm going to be constantly moving forward and backward in the middle there, and trying to keep the AI firing at units in the trees on either side while we hit them in the flanks with the units in the middle. There's not a whole lot to be done about these units sitting in the trees in the northeast. If you can try going forward, but then you'll get flanked from across the river, and you don't have your defensive line at that point would be in the wheat fields along the left, and I just don't like it. It can work, but your cover isn't great, and your artillery is all in the open, and it sort of clusters the AI closer together, and I think you get charged more that way. So I kind of prefer what happens when you stay a little further back in the tree line. So we got one supply wagon going up for another one. Still messing around in the woods over here. That's going to be a constant all battle. It just doesn't. I never really pushed that unit out, and it's just sort of a mess. I probably could focus fire my canister a little bit more to deal with the charges, but the auto targeting, I mostly let the auto targeting take care of it. It seems to do okay, but definitely some room for optimization there. Definitely make sure you have a general or something or other sitting on the 2 vision points, depending on where you have your units deployed. If you lose those, you lose a lot of vision around the battlefield. The vision points in this map are extremely powerful for whatever reason. One of the other strategies that I tried was a sort of a similar setup to what I used at the very beginning of the battle, but with more ranged artillery. And my goal was to sort of bait the AI in and have it run backwards when I ran out of vision and get a bunch of shots off on its artillery, with the initial goal being try and destroy all its rifled artillery initially so I can get my canister units up. The goal being to try and get them to send a single unit down, trigger the phase change, then run all my infantry up, get back into the fortification line in time to hold the rest of the enemy out of there. I gave it like 5 or 6 shots. I think there is a perfect run where you can pull it off, and it might be really good, but it was a mess. There are so many possible failure points, and there's just so many ways that they can send too many units down, and then you can't you can't get back into the line in time, or they don't send enough down, and you don't actually get your reinforcements early. And I eventually decided it's just not worth pursuing. So we're starting to get the cavalry in. Because they have the vision point, they're seeing them pretty easy. So I'm trying to just give volleys and then run away. Doesn't work particularly well, but if the positioning is a little different and they aren't sitting on that vision point, then your cavalry can do whatever it wants up there. But the AI is starting to cluster up a little bit. It's got a bunch of the artillery just sitting up there, which is fortunate because there's no infantry near it. They're bringing a couple of units down. We're going to have to start targeting when they get in close. The Siege and the Whitworth are both very useful for this because of their range. The Whitworth really is relatively disappointing in damage compared to other artillery at the moment. But its long range ability to just make sure you can get fire on a target is, I think, makes it worth a slot. I don't think you're ever necessarily field huge batteries of it, or like large number of units of it, but having one or two in these longer battles where you have to get rid of the rifle artillery is very useful. So you can see we've got pretty good fields of fire set up. I'm a little worried with this. There's a lot of units on the left, and they're in okay cover, and we're getting turned. Definitely trying to countercharge when we can. Unfortunately, it sort of draws us into multiple units, though. So I'm going to have the shotgun cav charge in this time. So you can see the AI is starting to commit towards down here, and it's going to start piling up. But we've at least sort of isolated this stuff in the west, and we're doing all right on our far left flank in the south. Our right's still a little weak. We've got a lot of artillery over there, but we're pretty short on infantry. But we don't have any infantry to spare because we're trying to hold this west flank. Actually, if that's probably a good point. If you're not trying to get a full clear, skip the units in the far on the far left, pull everything back, hold this defensive line, and then send some cavalry up to grab the point in the last 30 minutes or so. If I had 4 extra infantry units guarding this center, I would probably not have nearly as much trouble. And a lot of those AI units would just sit in the woods over there and not do anything. So I decided to charge the cav. Lots of other charges and stuff going on down here where I'm trying to charge a unit out of the forest and then get out of there when I can. We lose another officer. Malvern Hill turns out to be a really bad day for my officer corps. Very few wounded, lots of dead. Unfortunately, the cav had to go into 2 cav units, which I think I'm all right with. I wish if I'd had the time to micro more, but to make sure I kept fire on at the same time, that would have worked better. But you can see there's charges going on all over the place, so lots to focus on. Lots of time spent paused issuing orders. So right now I'm sending the dragoons to deal with the non-meleeed artillery. I really don't want to take canister as it might kill me. But managed to hold off that attack wave. We'll have to... It's important to try and pull off infantry that has charged and lost a lot of stamina to try and get it to recharge. Because if you get to a stage where everything, like the first couple of units have all lost all their stamina and they're at like 50%, and then you get charged again, that's when you die. So I switched targets with the cav and send the 2 shock units after the isolated unit and just sort of let my less experienced shotgun cavalry sort of deal with the other 2. And we get another charge over here, which I guess is sort of good, and then it opens up the area a little bit, but is bad, in which case, because I'm going to have another unit down there. As it charges, I should probably just get the units out of there. Just keep running and leave and let it do whatever it's going to do, because it's not going to go back north. it's going to come at my flank, and I have stuff set up there to deal with it, so I should have just bailed everything out rather than trying to kill this thing. So we got rid of one artillery unit, sending out the other 2 units over to kill the other one, and we're starting to take counter artillery fire on the shotgun unit, so I should really get that out of there. I'm not going to kill it this time. It's not charging anymore, and it's almost pretty low on stamina. Our speed skirmishers do successfully get across the river and away from him, so they're going to be safe. Lots of charges coming in again, but in the center, that's fine as long as it hits Anderson as opposed to my more experienced units. I'm fine with that, and it doesn't even make it. Wish that guy had stopped a little earlier. If he'd stopped in the water, that would have been perfect, but no such luck. So I'm sending my cav back in. I should probably actually be pulling it back out. Pull them back out, let them reload, let them recover a little bit, then send them back in. That artillery isn't going to get anywhere anytime soon. We got that unit standing in the water over there. Not entirely sure what's going on with that. I'm probably going to blame the... no, I can't see anything. I don't know. It should just keep walking. I'm not sure what's going on there. No idea. But overall, this is going fairly well. We've still got a fairly solid line. We've taken a lot of casualties, but not too worried. The right is looking a little iffy. I really wish I could find a way to pull off like one more infantry brigade from the west side and push it back into the line over here. That would be helpful. But you can see the being able to have those grenadier units to be able to countercharge and put a 2v1 penalty and just add extra weight to the charge is helping keep my line considerably steadier than if I didn't have them. And I don't think an extra normal like rookie rifle unit would do the same. I send the cavalry into melee again. That was a mistake. They were at like 40 or 50 stamina, or 40 or 50 condition. I really should have had them fire and then back off and rest first. They're going to take a lot of casualties just sort of milling around in the trees there. I am getting shots off with the skirmishers, but they're going to kill my own units just as much as anything else, and I'm taking artillery fire, so that was just a bad engagement. So noticing that their artillery is starting to get into range, so trying to kill that. I think they're actually firing at my cavalry at the moment, but they're going to come down after me soon. We get the moving to fire notifications, but I know that they basically only barely have to shift, so I'm not too worried about it. But always good to have that reminder that make sure that they aren't, trundling halfway across the field. So you may notice some edits here and there, and obviously everything is at 2x speed. I had to take a couple of breaks during the battle just to, take care of actual life things. But one of the interesting things around that is I noticed there were a couple times that I'd pause the game and come back and then unpause the game, and suddenly the light filter would switch. It was like it went from dark to light. I'm not sure if there's something like it seems almost like if you're in the bottom section of the map, then you can, like, it's darker than if you're in the top section of the map. I don't know. It's happened a couple of times where it just seems like it glitches a little bit. Not sure what's going on there. Anyways, more charges, counter charges, backing units out, trying to give them time to regen a little bit. Taking some extra fire in the middle. I'm trying to make sure that those units aren't the ones being targeted because they're in the open. We do have the general with cover guarding that area, and sort of have the general with XP sort of covering the entire thing to help level up. But still, really don't want those units in the middle to be taking the fire. So I've moved the cavalry off, letting it rest up for a bit. I keep pushing that unit into the corner in the woods. Now that I have the opening, I should just pull all those infantry units off and I should send one back north, and I should send one over to my line to the east. That would have been a much better use of my time than what I end up doing. Spend a lot of time walking around in the woods where I'm not going to do any damage to that unit over there when I could just get out of there and let it walk into a easier area to kill, preferably into range of my artillery. I've also got the grenadier units on the front line. I let that happen a couple of times, like buying time. I think I should, especially on the left side, I think what I should have done is there's several times where the AI is basically at maximum rifle range, and I should have pulled all of my infantry back to about where my artillery is, let the AI walk forward, then push them forward again. Because that means my artillery is going to be in a better range to do more damage. And if my grenadier units are on the front line, they're actually going to be in range where they can shoot with their muskets, which will help them level up as well. Not sure if I don't think charging the 2-star was a good idea. He took a lot of damage there. I think it was mostly from collateral damage, which wasn't great, but wanted to try and get him some melee stats, and I'm not sure I really succeeded there, but my overall goal is to try and get some more melee stats on a lot more of my army. Since the AI is more aggressive and it's harder to charge cancel, those melee stats are going to make the units a lot better. It's going to help them level up faster, and I just don't want to avoid it quite as much as I have in the past, where I could just stay out of melee and it wasn't a problem. I'm not really sure I'm going to develop the pure melee units. It's going to be a little difficult to keep them stocked up with weapons, given that the AI isn't going to be dropping 1842s anymore. I mean, I can always buy them. It'd be, I mean, even better if I can buy like Harper's Ferries or something that have melee and good shooting. That would be even better. But those are expensive, so we'll see. I decide to try and send a unit across the river, especially because I see that artillery unit moving there, and I want to try and get flanking fire on it. I don't think there's any AI units there. It turns out I am incorrect. But we do got quite a bit massing on my left here, which I'm not super excited about. They've only got a couple of infantry units in reserve. They finally gave up that vision point, which is nice. But they've definitely really started to focus down on me. So this is sort of the critical stage where my units are weaker. The AI is really piling up, and they still have enough units of decent size that if I'm not paying attention, things could go real bad. Like with my infantry, or my skirmisher unit going over here, who's getting flanked and now has to try and side slide into the woods, and that was a poor choice. Also, if I'd just paid attention, I would have seen them when I started crossing the river, and I could have just backed up and gone back to where I was, but did not notice in time. Well, I'm in good shape on the left. See, I was starting to move. I did finally pull those infantry out. I did it too late. I kept. So part of the reason I had units further to the north on the left there is because usually the AI crosses more there, and it just didn't. And I kept putting units over there, expecting it to try and do that, and it just never did. So it just didn't play that particularly well. I should be sending one of those units to the south, and then I think that would have turned out better. But the units on the right are definitely getting a little smaller, and I don't have any backup infantry over there, which is not a great situation. So Bayard has taken almost 1,000 casualties at this point, but he was almost all rookies, so not the worst situation, but got to be careful because he's starting to get. He can't get too high up for morale anymore, and just lost his officer. So this section right here is a little worrying because you can see that my left is actually starting to fall apart a little bit. Getting charged on the right again. I don't really have anything in support. I start trying to move units around. I think my thought was I want to try and capture the point, see if I can draw the AI in that way. In doing so, it turned out to be a mistake. I should have left those 2 units there, just blocking that river, because as soon as I pull those units out, the AI is going to start trying to cross there again. But you can definitely see my front line is starting to get a little small. We've got 2 units down to 800. Grenadier unit's still in good shape, but he can't do everything by himself. And you can see we're starting to take fire from the artillery, starting to take higher losses on our smoothbores over there. So I'm retargeting everything to try and get rid of that unit immediately, so I wasn't able to send the skirmisher unit over to actually deal with it. So I try and do that again. 2 guesses on how well that's going to go. So this is where I'm starting to see, okay, what can I pull into line, because I'm sort of running out. So I'm pulling some skirmishers over now that my right flank isn't getting hit too much. I'm pretty close to where I might have to throw my 3-star unit into the line, though I really don't want to have to do that. That'd be real expensive. I did end up pulling Ward down to fire at the flank there, which is good. But we didn't really kill that artillery. I find another unit just sitting up in the woods, ready to charge me, so now we're going to run away again. And trying to keep throwing units back into the line, because if that front line folds, then that entire position falls apart. Take a ton of losses on Ferrero's rifle. That's the downside of not having, I left the Grenadier unit on the line for too long, and now he is in a position to countercharge, so then we got hit by 2 units at once, so that ended particularly badly. Law apparently decided to charge the unit across the river for some reason. I think we just lost another officer. I'm just running that skirmisher into the corner and hoping I drop vision and save myself that way, because otherwise that unit's gone. So Garland actually penetrated the line, but now he's going to take fire from 3 or 4 artillery units, so he should hopefully go out pretty soon. And we got a second charge across the river, but that isn't going to end too well since it presents their flank when they try it. So the AI is getting pretty ground down, but so am I. But our artillery is mostly intact, and we've gotten most of his, so as long as we can keep the smoothbores firing, we should be all right. And we've just about finished off that artillery unit that's shooting at them, and then we can get the last artillery unit that I don't think that one in the center is targeting us, but I'm not certain. Gotta be careful with the cav now, because they sent that infantry unit all the way up to the victory point. Not really sure what that's about. Yet another officer down. I think we're up to 6 or so at this point. I could have tried pulling the smoothbores back to save them from the counter battery fire, but with how everything was going, I figured if I started moving them, I was going to miss the canister fire and probably end up in a worse situation. I could move that 3-star unit over to the left more, but I figured if I did that, I was going to take fire from the artillery, and I didn't want that to happen. But my cavalry has successfully drawn off several brigades into the north, so we're just going to go run away and let those units mill around up there. I'm sending Cook into the center because they had that infantry unit sitting there. I think that was more paranoia, and if that infantry unit was going to stick around, it would have been better to have him down by the middle ford. Well, if I'd known what was going to happen in a few minutes, it'll turn out to that would have been the right plan, but hard to know what the AI is going to do all the time. I'm never getting that skirmisher out of there, so I just put him in range where he can shoot at that guy in the flank over and over until he runs out of ammunition. And I pulling Ferrero off the line and going to put him in a corner where hopefully he can just get some free shots in, because he's basically combat ineffective at this point. Got lucky, they decided to charge to the side as opposed to straight up the middle, so we can just dump flanking fire into them. And here's about when I start noticing that for some reason the AI has decided it really wants to cross in the middle there, and it's starting to send multiple units over there. I'm not sure why it decides to do that, but it probably costs me a full clear, more or less, because of it. My cav has escaped, so I'm going to wait for the infantry to go away. Once that vision point isn't cleared anymore, then I'll go back and see if I can get the artillery, or if there's any other targets of opportunity. Their supply wagons are unfortunately sort of standing in the middle where I just can't get to them. There's just roving infantry wandering around. So again, I start trying to send a second infantry unit to the north by the flag. I can't see in the river for some reason, and oh, that was another mistake. Sending the supply wagon forward to see if I can draw on anything on the right flank some more, since the AI seems to have stopped advancing there. But you can see in general, their attack is probably more or less broken at this point. Like, they've got a few units sticking around, but they've got a whole bunch of units getting close to shattering. Except on the left here, where they have some relatively fresh brigades that are going after me. And I'm starting to run out of ammo, which is another really bad sign. Taking another 1,000 losses in that grenadier unit, so that's going to be expensive to replace. I guess probably not too much. That unit is all recruits, so, but would have been nice to keep him a little bigger, but didn't really have a choice. I think some of that loss was because he was sitting there out of range of himself, just getting fired at over and over when I should have pulled him back. So that was my fault. Starting to move the artillery around now that there's nothing really on the right for the smoothbores to fire at. And we've only got an hour left, so we do need to start moving towards the north. And going to try and close a pocket, but we're getting charged into the woods on the left again. We don't get caught, which is good, but we're never getting those units out of there. We just don't have the time. But it's good the AI is mostly dead because, you know, we have, what, biggest unit on the right over there, not counting the grenadiers, is 800 men, which is not great considering most of those units started out at 1,200 or 1,500 or higher. So casualty rate has definitely gone up quite a bit. I think when I played this in 1.24, I just more or less held in place on the first line and murdered everything with artillery, which was pretty much the theme of 1.24. So good to see that it's not really working out here. Always interesting when I actually have to come up with a new way to play a battle as opposed to just doing the same old, same old. So trying to get these units into range so they can fire at Confederate units just sort of standing in there in the open. Got a few charges, but nothing that's big enough that it's actually going to make it through the canister fire anymore. Pulling up the Dragoons to put fire into this unit's flank without real perks dedicated to it, and with the rifles or the carbines they're using, they aren't going to do enough damage to actually do anything. But it's a chance for free experience. We can see for some reason the AI has decided that it absolutely wants to get into this wooded area over here, and so it's pulling all of its units that were attacking me in the center and going over there, which is doubly confusing because it doesn't have any of the victory points at the moment, so you'd think it would go after one of those. But, well, if nothing else, the AI is often good at finding the most annoying option to go for, even if it's not very good at finding the most efficient option to try and get a draw. So I don't want to push up too much with the infantry. They've already taken a lot of losses, and I don't want to advance over open ground, but I'm going to sort of move the artillery up to get into better positions to deal with these units. Probably should have started this a little bit earlier, but I didn't quite realize that the AI was going to just send everything across the river to the west. I thought it was going to come back, and it just doesn't. So I'm a little delayed in my response. But you can see they've just lose a brigadier general. But you can see they've just stacked up 5 or 6 units here for some reason. Don't know. No idea what it's up to, but they're real eager to, I guess, hide in the woods and annoy me. In retrospect, I think I either should have left 4 units in that area so that they just didn't come through there. We were going to grind through the middle in time anyways to push up and take the victory point that way. Yeah, I don't know. This end phase of the battle is a bit of a mess. Mostly due to decisions I made earlier in the battle, but starting to move the units around, starting to get the envelopment, moving all the artillery forward. We do get charged a couple of times, but that's all right. These units are pretty damaged, so they aren't going to do too much. Easy melee opportunities at this point. I move Polk forward again. That to try and hit Lawton in the flank. I should have pulled him back more because I'm pretty sure he's almost exhausted at this point. Also, I didn't notice that my cavalry was taking fire, and very expensive unit that I'm trying to slowly grow and taking fire again for no reason. So at this point, I just decide that, well, okay, I decided to move back a little bit. I should have decided to just pull out entirely. There's just no reason to try and contest this area anymore. I know I don't have enough time to kill anything in there. I should just leave and get what I can in the center. I might have been able to snag 2 supply wagons right there, but I was going to take fire from multiple infantry brigades doing it, so I don't think that was worthwhile. And now Ripley's charging, and Polk is basically dead because he's out of ammo, he's out of condition, and there's no one there to really support him. Starting to slowly move units up to kill the units on the right there. Try and fall back, but it's too late. And we're just going to get mauled in melee now. And that's the point where I finally decide, okay, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm just going to pull everything out. So I'm still trying to have Ward fire at Ripley, hoping to maybe rout him or something, but it doesn't work. Almost got these units down here wiped out, so we can start heading north again, but we really don't have time to. We're not gonna have time to get the full clear. It just isn't gonna happen. I think with some better play, you could pull it off. Combination of better play and some better luck with where the AI decides to send units. But overall, we held. We have the victory points. They're not going to be able to take them back. Well, I say that as they have, 5 infantry units sitting around the victory point that they probably could take back if they sent all those units up there, and I'd have to fight them over open ground for it. But instead, they sort of sit around and don't do anything. And I'm starting to get all my artillery up there, so if we had another 30 minutes in this battle, we'd get everyone. I guess maybe not. There's that unit all the way in the east. There's the unit all the way in the southwest. Just probably wouldn't really get to. Poor Poke is just getting torn apart. But we got all our units disengaged on the left there, at least, other than Polk, so that's at least good. Pulling Ward back, hoping to get out of vision. Yeah, he's now decided to come south when I'm sort of disorganized. Thankfully, its units are pretty small, so it can't do too much to me. And Anderson finally just starts to move now that I've sent a bunch of units up, so lose another officer. And most of these are all kills too, so I'm not even getting them back after the second bull run, which is pretty sad, but we should be able to recover. We'll manage. So trying to figure out what to do with these units. Going onto the VP because I don't want to accidentally lose it at the end. Thankfully, Garland's charging in, and now we can pay him back. Just trying to get units into position to be able to clear up whatever I can. But there's just stragglers all over the place, so no way we're going to clear it. They finally send someone to go after the victory point. And we'll get the cavalry in on the flank. Well, sometime soon I'll get around to it, apparently. So I send my shotgun cavalry up there and then proceed to not notice that that unit has already recovered, and it's sending a cavalry unit in there is a terrible idea. Get some more damage on Sems, just move some units over, and then I'll shoot at him for the rest of the battle. And we take one volley, second volley, and we shatter. And I notice it just in time for the shattering when I can't do anything about it anymore. That's really frustrating. It should not have happened. Thankfully, the shattered unit will go back into camp, and that unit isn't most expensive to replace, but always frustrating to miscontrol like that. I'm not really sure why that 10-pounder. I guess since it had to move to fire over the hill, that's why it didn't auto target. But only a couple minutes left. Getting in a few extra shots. But you can see there's what, 4,000 or 5,000 maybe at most infantry left on the board that we weren't able to get to. Issuing some orders that won't matter because we don't actually have enough time. But you can see if I had a little more time, if I moved a little faster, if they'd been more in the center, something like that, you could potentially pin them in this open area between the river and the units up north, and then you could clear them out pretty easily. But okay, so we took 11k casualties. We've got 13% medicine, so we're getting roughly a little under 1,500 back. So about 9.5k casualties versus what, 36, 37k. Not quite a full clear, but still pretty decent. But really high casualties for this battle compared to what they've been in the past. So lots of dead officers, couple promotions at least, but especially losing the brigadier general, and several of those were like 70, 80 XP colonels. So that's gonna hurt. But we got a lot of good experience on these units, so got some Lorenzes. That's good because we lost a lot. Some Sharps. Not even sure. Not sure where we captured Sharps from, actually. No idea what unit was equipped with that because they didn't have any skirmishers. Bunch of 1861s. Yeah, 11 10-pound ordnances. Think of how many artillery units I had to kill, or how many guns they had to have had for me to capture that many of those. If I'd stayed up front where that artillery could fire at me more, I probably would have had another 5 to 6k casualties minimum. In terms of kills, no real surprises. Artillery is mostly at front, snipers are next, but those are not ridiculous kill numbers. Those are, in a lot of ways, kind of low for artillery, and from what we've seen in the past. Like even the base game, you can outstrip that pretty easily. But you can see the infantry did a whole lot of the work, and a decent chunk of that is all melee kills too. Very high losses on some of the infantry units. 50% losses on an infantry unit that's 2K is not something you ever want to see, but lost a ton on that cav unit. You can see some of those infantry units. I'm pretty sure those were the ones in the woods and stuff, or the ones that got into melee, or the ones that did most of the damage. We neutralized their artillery pretty well, but we basically had a battle plan completely designed around doing that almost entirely. We also played around negating the charges quite a bit, but in this case we managed to get their artillery to do not a whole lot. So definitely not a good battle. They're not a perfect battle. It was all right. Definitely, I think you could get the casualties lower if you played a little better, get a little luckier. But that's how on Legendary I figured that seemed like the best way to go about it. So the army's still in decent shape. Took a lot of losses, but those units are still around 1K, which means they're quite usable, and we can got plenty of recruits to dump back into them. Got decent experience. Doesn't look like we have anything too close on the way towards a 3rd star or a 2nd star, but I guess some of those infantry units, if we can dump a better officer in there, we might be able to get them to 2nd star. So just comparing how the 2-star 3-inch unit did versus the 3-star 20-pounder. Yeah, he actually did pretty well. If we hadn't gotten him killed, he'd be in real good shape. Don't quite have the Lieutenant General on the Avatar. We'll probably get in the next couple battles. The Cold RR seemed to do pretty well, but it was also just sitting on the flank where it could fire all day long, so hard to say. And got some good XP on those units. So got a decent number of rifles, which is good because we're going to have to repair a lot of units. Lots of lieutenant colonels and stuff are kind of bare on higher colonels, and we only got 3 new ones that can actually put 1-star units together. So that isn't great, but. And we got veterans and recruits. Not great, not terrible, so still fairly high values, but not the end of the world. So yeah, good enough result to keep going. There might be a better way to do Malvern Hill on lower difficulties. I think holding in place is probably still a pretty viable option, especially if they have, if you're running against Napoleons or 12-pounders or whatever. Definitely, you can stick up there and you'll be all right. So you can keep canister close. But for Legendary and my specific setup, that seemed like the way to go about it. Much bigger infantry units and fallback. All right, hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching.